All right, well, it's 10:03, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the presentation today. Again, thank you all for joining. We're really thrilled that you're here to be with us today. So before we get started here, we'll just have a couple of housekeeping items that we'll go through. So first of all, don't miss out on some of our other webinars. We have a full slate of deep dive webinars scheduled for this year. We'll be rerunning customization versus configuration, which was one of our most popular ones last year, as well as some new ones like how to set up your reporting, working with citizen development, and one like this, care and feeding of your instance. So make sure you scan here or grab the chat, the link from the chat to look at our schedule for the coming year. And no presentation would be complete without the forward-looking statement slide. So if there's any statements made here today that indicates product developments or future enhancements in the product, they are not guarantees that those are actually going to happen. All right, let's get down to the heart of the matter here. What is the problem we're here to solve today? So, well, first of all, we're going to familiarize you with the idea of the fact that you have a ServiceNow estate. I'm sure a lot of you probably didn't know you had an estate, but you do. And what we consider that is all your instances, clones, and integrations. And this also includes all the data in your system and all the way your users can interact with it. So as platform owners or other roles in the ServiceNow ecosystem, you may be looking to optimize or prevent performance issues. Obviously, I think most of you know, and why you're here is if you don't intervene and put things, checks and balances into place, that will become a problem. And also we need approach that is consistent and regularly managed. So that's what the problem is that we're setting out to help you solve today. So here is our agenda that we'll be going through. So we'll start with the intro so you can kind of get to know each of us a tiny bit, but we're not going to dwell on that because I know you want to get into the heart of the matter here, which is going through our instance, table, and data management sections. So without any further ado, it was such a cliche. My name's Brita Koch, and I'm a senior marketing manager, and I've been with ServiceNow for about 14 and a half years. I spent 10 years in the field helping customers implement ServiceNow, and since then, I've had some roles in leading practices and in the marketing team where we concentrate on post-content marketing which is really trying to provide you with information you need to adopt our platform. So Gareth, would you like to take it off next and give us a brief introduction?
Absolutely. I'm Gareth Millward. I'm in the product success team here, which tries to help customers like you adopt the product to the best of its ability. Previously, I was also in leading practices, and I've been implementing customers with mostly customer service systems for the last 20 odd years. Jared.
Hi, I'm Jared Munt. I'm on the platform product management team focusing on evangelism, again, helping everyone get the most out of their ServiceNow investment.
And last but not least, Sean.
Hi, folks. Super excited to be here. My name's Sean McLean. I'm a master technical trainer with ServiceNow. Previous as with Brita and some of the other folks, I've had experience implementing at a small consultancy before I joined ServiceNow almost 13 years ago, and been involved in implementations and mostly training, delivery of training, and those kinds of things.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So before we get into it, we're going to start with a poll because we want to try to make this interactive so you can interact with us today and make this a little more engaging, not just talking to some slides. So first question is, do you already have some kind of a cadence for maintaining your instances? And so this is a single choice question here. So no, maybe yes, but we just review before upgrades. Yes, we have a cadence, but it's not great. Or yes, we have, and we're here to learn how to optimize. And Sean, I think you have the wrong poll up. Sean.
1 sec.
Sorry about that, folks. We'll take those answers anyway, though.
You may get twice the chance.
There we go.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that, folks. Thanks for the responses, fast and furious there. I'm hoping not to see a lot of number ones, but it looks like we got about 30% there with not a regular cadence. So this webinar should be super helpful to you today. As we say in Minnesota, everything's super this or super that. All right, we'll give you a couple more seconds here to fill this out. Thank you for your patience as we get this sorted. So it looks like it's pretty even across the board here. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, that doesn't happen very often in
No.
these polls.
No, not at all. All right, so I think we have something for everyone here. All right, so I'm going to move along here and we will get over to our first section, which is instance management. So this is the highest level of, where we're talking about managing your instances. And since I am not the expert on this, I'll be sending this over to Jared. Take it away.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I've been in the ServiceNow ecosystem for about 10 years now. I've been in your shoes as a customer administrator, been a developer, and yeah, one of the things that came up a lot when I owned an instance was those occasional tickets of, hey, this is slow. This is, what's going on? It's different today. So overall, our recommendation is to routinely take a look at things, and so you know when parts of the platform are diverging from their normal operating behavior. So yeah, we'll want to review configuration, of course, but also that second bullet point, taking a look at logs and errors. That way, my instances were never perfectly clean. I never got it down to 0 warnings and 0 errors, but you kind of, if you look at it regularly, you kind of get a feel for what normal operating is. And then we'll go a lot deeper into this maintain your tables for peak performance later on with some out-of-box tools. But it's not just take a look on a regular basis. We can go on to that next slide and talk about some more specifics on a particular cadence.
And one thing I want to bring up just before we go to the next slide, and this is not a sales pitch, but if you already do own Impact Advanced or Total, you do have access to the Impact Instance Observer. So you may want to talk to your ServiceNow team about leveraging that to help you with some of these tasks. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Sean here, where he's going to take us through a little exercise here on what your cadence, find out what you're currently doing.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to do as we were talking through these pieces is to try to pull some of those pieces from you. With I'm looking with more than 100 people in this room, you can contribute as much as we can to hear some really unique insights. So I was looking to see if you could put in the chat, what are some of the things that are on your administrative, speaking of cadence, what's on your administrative daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly lists? And I'm looking for call outs to see on the chat for what you have. There are some great documents out there and also some great conversations in the community on some recommendations for that. Some led by Mark Stanger from 10 years ago that are brought up again as recently as a few months ago. But I want to hear or see, what do we have in the chat for what's your day-to-day checklist? What do you do every day in the instance for maintenance?
And don't be shy, folks. There's no wrong answers here. And if it's nothing, you can also say you're not doing anything right now. So, all right, everybody's being shy. Come on, let's see some responses here. All right, nothing. There we go. Thank you. Security, nothing.
I do have there was one that was HR offboarding, which is a daily for info security. That's smart to be checking and get those people out. Miguel points out reviewing mid servers, and that makes sense as a pretty daily and regular check.
I see some security items in there. We do have a deeper dive on security planned for later this year, so stay tuned to our series.
Ooh, I'm like going, wait, I want that. One of the other ones, I got some people who have them as questions, and I would go, they're not questions, they're perfect. Some people have commented on checking logs. Reviewing system logs and system diagnostics is one of the biggest and easiest to kind of put into your daily schedule. In fact, some people I've worked with that administrate a system, and it sounds ironic, but they keep a log of the daily checks of their logs, or they'll have a checklist going, I did this, and these are the standouts to me.
A lot.
Yeah. Some of the other ones that are coming through, and again, I think that part of the reason I particularly wanted to do the cadence piece by getting your feedback on it was you would get things that we might not suggest. We can look at the daily and say review system diagnostics or review the previous transaction log to see, status and overhead. But some of the ones that you're coming through, looking for data errors or checking discovery schedules, or several of you brought up those things. Those might not be things that, the four of us on the panel might have thrown into the list. And you can look back at the webinar chat and go, oh, hey, here's one that we should be doing over in our org. So we got a lot of dailies. How about weeklies?
Usually with heavy data sets. Oh, here's a
And
domain.
domain SEP instances, yeah. So what are some of the weekly ones?
Or maybe some of those dailies were weekly or
Yeah.
other cadence.
What I should do in here, and I'll make a point, is just to separate it.
Okay,
In
schedule.
chat, I put weekly so we can see the ones below that.
Scheduled per requirements, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, security findings, performance status.
Some people mention logs, and I think what's kind of interesting is we can take those same log files and look for, in the log data, be looking for large log files or overly sized at the end of the, like that's more of a semi-frequently, like weekly would be a good cadence to run those. Or look at slow queries or slow running performance jobs to see and identify so we can tailor those. On the daily, that's almost too frequently, but weekly, it makes more sense to kind of, now I can track this for quarterly. Mid-server CPU memory and usage trending. Okay. Well, of course, if we did daily, weekly, let's talk about cadence for monthly. And let me put up my.
Yeah, and one of the things I'll do with the feedback we get from here, there will be sort of like a kit at the end of the presentation that'll get emailed out to you, and I'll take this information and we'll compile that into the kit that we'll send out, and also make it available on our new customer onboarding section on the community.
Right. And I want to call this out into the chat because one of the conversation pieces that pops up, David Perez points out, we get millions of syslog entries, but I'd like to understand what to do with those. One of the great things we can do for, even in what we've talked about, daily, weekly, monthly, is we can create with those syslog entries filters or schedules for them. And if we create those filters, that gives us the opportunity to generate reports that we run or look at weekly or monthly. Hit this filter to look at these millions of logs filtered for these core things. Anything that is over a duration of gives us our slow queries. And so we probably, and this is one of those things that when thinking about cadenced maintenance, we can create a system of queries that we can, at the end of the day, I run this. At the end of the week, I check this query log to see what's showing up. Again, in the filter, it's easy enough to say, for the past 7 days. Therefore, I'm not looking at something that's in the millions. I'm looking for something that would get me compiling the millions, and grouping those results into the monthly sections gives me a little more breakout of things. All right, so we've got some great answers on the daily, weeklies, monthlies. And that, of course, leads us to quarterlies. Now, so I mentioned in weeklies, what we might be starting to do is taking those same logs and applying filters to them. We could do the same thing in monthlies. In those monthly angles, I might be looking at some things like starting to track table growth to make sure that, in particular, as we ramp new applications, or as we make new applications available to wider audiences in our instance. I remember doing this for an organization where we were bringing on, even in the ITSM suite, we were bringing on change management to different departments. So we wanted to be able to measure and check to make sure we didn't suddenly get like we did with incident, where it went from 0 to 1,000 miles an hour like that. As we look at some of the quarterly ones, we see
the syncing licensing true up, which is a good one.
that's awesome. Yeah,
Yep.
I love that.
Health
Yeah.
requests. Yep. All right. Okay, in the essence of time, I think we should probably get moving on here. So the next thing we want to talk a little bit about is instance consolidation. And I think Gareth was going to take this one.
Yeah, so if you want to reveal the words there, Britta, uh,
I'm going to keep them secret.
uh, really we need you to ask yourselves which environments have we got and why are they there? It's very easy for sub-production instances to accumulate, and sometimes they're just no longer needed. So for each of the sub-production instances you've got, just work out why they're there. Does it have a defined purpose? Is it being used? And then you can look at, do we really need them or can we consolidate them? Because in the end, the more instances you have, the more instances you have to manage. And all of that management, it just slowly eats up all the time. So look at those instances, see if they need different kinds of data and whether they could be joined together. And we can look at an example of that. On the next slide, we've got an example where maybe it's a rather complex environment we're starting with, where you've got 10 instances, not including production. Development, test, integration testing, acceptance testing. I won't read through the list. You can read for yourselves. But the purpose here is to think about how you can take those instances and bring them together and reduce that maintenance overhead. So you could bring test and integration testing together because they really require the same kind of data. They've got the same requirements. Similarly, UAT and training could be put together because, again, they really need similar kinds of data, which is very reflective of your production environment. Likewise, operational testing, performance testing, it's not quite the same as UAT, but they need similar kinds of data, and the different kinds of testing you do there could easily be scheduled to work at different times and just reduce that maintenance overhead. And of course, there are some instances you really do need to keep separate. Dev, you always need a dev environment to be able to make those changes. Administrators might want somewhere to have a play around and try new features, see whether it's going to work for them. And if you're testing a new upgrade, definitely you want a different instance to test that new version. And maybe you've got some destructive testing that you've done and you just don't need it anymore. Just delete it. Get rid of it once it's no longer needed. And you will make everyone's lives that little bit easier.
Yeah.
No kidding. I think that brings us to our next topic, which is system cloning guidance and considerations. Now that we've talked about what kind of instances, how you could consolidate your instances.
Absolutely. So obviously you're not going to want to rebuild all of your instances separately. There's a system clone functionality to manage those sub-production instances and keep them up to date. So that basically works by taking a copy of the production backup data and putting it into your sub-production instance. When you're doing that and you are creating these clones, talk to the people who are using it and make sure they're kept up to date with what's going on. Your developers won't thank you if you go and refresh the dev system and destroy some of the work that they've spent hours, days, possibly weeks working on. At least give them the opportunity to back up their data. If not, say, no, don't refresh it just yet. We're in the middle of something. You should also kind of make considered decisions about what data you need in each of those instances. It's very rare that your developers are going to need a full copy of everything in production, whilst UAT is going to need something that is very reflective of production because you want to make sure that those changes really work with the production style data set. All of this can be brought together into a clone profile. You can use that clone profile to decide what data you want to preserve in the sub-production environment, which you might want to preserve development data or previously created test data. You can define exclude tables, which is data you definitely don't want to copy from production. For example, you don't want to copy customer data into development. And you can define some cleanup scripts to run after the clone has happened. You can use that to either recreate test data in a known state, to modify or delete data if there's stuff you want to redact or manipulate to make it safe for use in a development or testing environment. And as you go along, you can start to automate these steps. You can set a schedule so that UAT, for example, is refreshed every month, so you know it's always kept up to date. you can build those cleanup scripts so it makes it easier to make sure you always have a automated, repeatable process and people know what to expect. Again, the more you can automate, the easier it is for everyone.
Yeah, one of my favorite purposes of those post-clone scripts is we in prod had a group called dev instance admins. And so after the clone was done, we'd have a script that added everyone in that group admin. So just one less thing for the sysadmin to remember to do after they got that clone is complete email.
Yeah. One of my favorites was just a cleanup script which changed the color of the different environments so you could tell which one you were in instantly.
Yes, that color coding is so good. All right, great overview of the system clones. Of course, you know me, I got another poll for you. So, do you feel like you have the expertise on your team to perform the maintenance based on what you're learning so far? So, no, we could use some more training. Yes, but we could still use some more training. Or yes, we feel like we're confident and good to go. So it looks like we're trending in the middle here.
Oh, that's not a surprise. I've never heard people say we never need any more training.
And luckily for everyone on the call, Sean has provided a list of training courses in the appendix that we will share with you after the call. So yeah, it looks pretty much there in the middle. A couple more responses coming in here.
Well, and the cool thing about the training resources is there's a combination of both, like the instructor-led facilitated models where on the one hand, you're there at a certain time, which I know gets challenging to be there, but you have the value of, like we do now, everybody able to share information and ideas, and that training for system admin advanced. But there's a number of classes in those resources that are on demand at your own pace, and that's kind of a helpful thing too.
Absolutely. It looks like we've got pretty much everybody that's going to participate in here. So I'll move on to the next slide here and our next section, which is table management. So we're going to tackle this topic about, how you're going to manage your table growth as you start to put more data into the system. And so I'm going to tee that up for our expert, Jared, to bring us some information on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is the first of three tools or built-in products to the platform that we can use to manage some of those unruly tables. I will shout out that these are just a few more tools for your toolkit. These aren't necessarily things that you're going to be using on a daily basis or even an annual basis. Some of these I've run across when I was debugging other things, but personally have never needed to configure them. In a lot of cases, these are just already configured out of box. And this is the big bonus of this is that these exist. So if you do run into one of these use cases, you won't have to code it yourself or build a custom flow. These are fully supported out-of-box tools that have been around for a while and very stable. So the first one up is table rotation. Again, this doesn't apply to every table. So not every app will need this, but for those extra large tables where the data, the most important part here is things that are only required to be held on the platform for a short period of time. These are not your incidents. These are not, approvals, things like that you'd want to have for accountability purposes, in some cases for years. These are the things that are generated quickly and kind of go away. And let's see, they're broken up into these shards. So if you're looking at the table manager behind the scenes, you'll see things where it'll be syslog 00001 will be the actual table name, but you'll access it by syslog. And I don't know any, like I mentioned, if anyone else in the group wants to jump in here, personally, if you have a rare case, because this is stored in multiple actual tables in the database, if you need to change the schema of any of these things, it isn't automatically replicated to all the shards in this group. So there is a UI action. If you tweak something, you can click synchronize shards and it will synchronize it across all of the tables. But for the most part, I've run into this, but I've never had to add or configure this.
Okay. All right, well, let's talk about some other things here that we need to address, like table extension.
Yeah, this is kind of like the cousin feature to the shards. This is for things that we do want to keep around forever, but we don't necessarily want to have, let's say there's 50 million rows in this group of tables. Every time the service desk pulls up a table, every time the business office pulls up the table, we don't want to search through everything. We kind of operationally are referencing the recent stuff, but for regulatory purposes, we need to keep everything. So this is a different model where behind the scenes we're still creating shards. You'll still see that table name 00001 behind the scenes, but you'll still just do all your development and reference it as that primary table name. And yeah, that's.
Did I move ahead too far?
But again, these are things where there's a lot of records, and even with database indexes and things like that, it's still the amount of I/O input output that's referencing these tables. The indexes are not enough to keep it under check. So we have these further options. And again, you don't have to copy down this particular slide. This is just letting you know these things exist. When you do run into this in the real world, our docs website goes into good detail about all of these, the finer points of how we want to make sure we're querying based off of the created on date and things like that. So just when you're walking around, taking a look under the hood in your instance, if you see something like that syslog _ 000022, you'll know that you're looking at a special type of table group.
So is this like if you see something, say something at the airport?
This is don't get freaked out. This explains what you are looking at. And so those are the two types. Again, not for every app, not for every table, but for those special use cases. And you don't want to do a hack or build something yourself. These are stable, out-of-box, platform-supported methods. And the third one we have is probably the most common of the three that we'll talk about. This is the table cleaner. The table cleaner is not eligible to be used on those table rotation or table extension, the shard models. So this can be used on just about everything else. And what we do is instead of creating a custom flow or custom script to move some of those things to purge those data, we have a clean out-of-box method for you to do that. And let's
That's
see.
a good time saver for people. Then they don't have to create the script and do all that themselves.
Yes. My favorite feature of the table cleaner is, I'm not sure if it goes into it in the next slide. Yes, actually it does. Over in the don't column here, don't expect a single run to remove large volumes. So this is very performance aware. It will run in the background. I believe it's if we look under the hood, it's going to run once an hour and is very lightweight. So in a single run, it will run for a period of time and then we'll pause and catch up on everything else later. So if you happen to hit a particular milestone where 1 million records need to be cleaned, don't expect it all to be done in 1 hour. We don't want to hammer the database. We want to kind of chip away at it hour over hour, and everything will get caught up. So, yeah, and I'm seeing in the chat, we're asking for some specific examples of a table cleaner. So I know this is a little bit different than archiving. So table cleaning, we're just getting rid of things.
Okay.
Anyone else in the group want to jump in with
So the table cleaner, I
purging?
think. Sorry.
What was that, Gareth? Did you have one?
I was no, I realized I was wrong actually. I was about to say the table cleaner can be used to clean up archives, but we've actually got destroy rules for that. The syslog, for example, the sharding. For sharding, table rotation is already defined for syslog. So syslog will be around for a period of time, and then it will age out as that data gets overwritten. Whereas another example of sharding would be the audit logs. That's extension instead. So the audit logs will just keep extending and will keep it going on forever until you ask ServiceNow to come and remove some of them, which is a much more awkward process. But the whole point about audit logs is you don't need to get rid of them.
Okay.
Yeah. And Harrison, one of the other things I wanted to throw out to that question of, real examples in real context. First, anybody in the participants that has it to contribute, but second, just as much as we check in the docs, I'd really go as well to the community, because in the community, and again, it's I think one of the references I pointed in the list that we'll be sharing later, but some of the community discussions on this point to organizations that are using Table Cleaner for X versus using it for Y, and I feel like that's kind of almost a really better than because you're hearing the feedback from many customers, because they'll all be jumping on that community thread to go, yeah, this or not that. And like I said, I sent one link, but I'm not sure on the one for Table Cleaner specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I think Docs is really good for telling you how to do things, and the community is really good for giving you some context or a color on.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I think of it. Like Docs is the official, but community is the real world. We've done this, or what about, or to see people who've walked the walk, so to speak.
Because I know
Okay.
customers always want to know what other customers did. That's, it's always helpful information.
Right.
Yeah, you threw out the name Mark Stanger from the old school community. I'll throw out, and I think he's even in attendance in the group today. The new school Mark is Mark Rothoff. He's one of the European Dev MVPs, and not so much for new customer instances, but some of those instances that have been around for a decade or so. The database sizes get large with hidden attachments and things like that. And recently he's had some really great content on how to detect that and how to purge that. So new Mark, thanks for joining. I will say that back to the table cleaner, the example I have is, maybe you've seen this in your organization's email policy, where we have data retention. We say, depending on what industry we're in, let's say we must retain things for 2 years, but then we absolutely just have to delete it after 2 years, right? Because we don't want to just keep everything forever for legal reasons, for governance reasons, whatever the case may be. So within the context of ServiceNow, there could be, depending on your organization's requirements, inbound emails. We absolutely have to keep those for 2 years, or incidents, or whatever the record type happens to be. But then we have to purge it, and we have to audit the fact that we are purging it. And so this would be one of those tools that you could use to make sure that we're not keeping things around.
And you know what, Jared? That is a perfect lead in to our next topic.
Excellent.
Way to go. That wasn't planned, by the way, but it just worked out really well. So our next topic is data management, which, I think Jared was referring to some of the challenges around that. And obviously, one of the first things you need to understand is, what are your retention policies for your business, for that record type? And it's just as dangerous to keep a record for too long as to not have it. I've had experiences when I was in pharmaceutical industry where, we hadn't gotten rid of some records, and then, you get sued and they do discovery and that information is available and it really shouldn't have been available. So there's pros and, there's dangers of either side of that retention. So it's really important to know what your document types are and what your policies are. And of course, because we're very thorough about these things, we have a do's and don'ts slide for this as well. So just some basic things here, like records should be read-only. Obviously they should be searchable and easily defined. Access should be limited, and not everybody gets to have access. And the ability to audit and notifications of any non-compliance. And then obviously you want to make sure you track those expiration dates so you get that data out of there before it becomes a liability. And then make sure you have a backup. As somebody I used to say, one is none, two is one. So keep that in mind with these important records. And then obviously this is just a general best practice. You don't want to print out those records, because then you have an uncontrollable version of that may or may not get destroyed on the appropriate date or may get into the wrong hands. So that's just a quick overview of retention to kind of give you some things to think about and make sure you have those on your radar. And I'm going to turn it over to Sean now, and he's going to talk about some of the tools that we have available to help with some of these retention challenges.
Ooh. Well, there are a couple of different things available, and some of them we've already kind of hinted at. Archiving is one of those pieces that we can use to offload old data. We've already talked about being able to run archive and purge. But the other ones that are out there, including CMDB, Data Manager, and Email Retention, are plugins. And it should be mentioned that in particular, the CMDB Data Manager is one of those plugins that I think with Vancouver, it started in Rome, and then I think as of Vancouver is turned on by default. On the other hand, I was playing with an instance this morning that is a Vancouver for one of the classes I teach, and I found I was having to find the plugin to set it up and run it. So that's one of those pieces that you might want to look into more, so that we know in terms of that tools on the governance side of things, in particular with the data CMDB data manager. There was a question about that as well, so I want to clarify. The CMDB data manager is not all data, it's configuration management, and it's particularly tied to creating a governance policy around what rules and what filters do I take about making configuration items ready for retirement or then eventually dispersal. So if I'm doing that, then what I'm doing in the tool is setting filters and adjusting the filters accordingly based on my organization or fields governance and policies. Email retention, similarly, a policy plugin that you can download. And as Aaron pointed out, we want to be careful because some of them, it's an either or rule, right? There's I want to retain it for this long, but longer than a certain period has issues or risks as well. And both of those tools in particular, when you have the plugin, are essentially identifying classes and filtering based on the, in configuration based on these classes of CI, based on these rules and this potential approval, then we can take these next actions to remove them through. And so that's what I wanted to mention. When we talked, when we were discussing these slides as a group, I was mentioning the logs and other management, just as still wanting it out there, not so much that there are tools directly towards logs other than the ones that I believe Gareth mentioned with regard to the system log and some of the other logs that we'll go through and have cleaning, but that should be kept in mind from a governance perspective as well. Because those logs that build up over time, we want to make sure that we're fully removing them when audit and compliance conditions come into play. So I think those are the pieces that I wanted to mention about those tools, and to see what else maybe my colleagues can throw in.
Oh, sure. Sorry, I went to jump the gun here.
No, that's perfect. Do's and don'ts.
Yes, I think Gareth was going to take us through.
I'll talk about this one. So archiving is really important. A while ago, one of my colleagues was talking to me, and he gave me a rule of thumb which stuck with me. You shouldn't be putting data into a system unless you know when it's going to leave the system. You should
Hmm.
be defining your archive rules as part of your development. You need to know what your life cycle is for the data. When you're defining archive rules, you basically build up criteria of things that you want to archive, and it will move that data into an archive table. So it's still available in the system. You can still access it if you need it, but it's not going to be clogging up those operational tables, slowing down queries, and making the jobs of your agents harder and slower. Start small and work up to your final archiving criteria if you are doing this in a relatively mature system. And every time you create an archive rule, you will almost always want to create a destroy rule as well, so that you get rid of stuff once you no longer need it. Don't try and boil the ocean. Don't try and do it all at once. Don't try and archive the sharded tables. Anything which has got a rotation or an extension on, archiving isn't going to work. And don't try and stack them. You can only have one archive rule on each table. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. The next part.
Yeah, that leads us into our next topic of large attachment cleanup.
Yeah. And large attachments are another way that a lot of space can be consumed very quickly. There's no magic bullet for this one. Almost all customers need file attachments. Customers need to talk to you about things. Employees need to show you how things are appearing. There's all kinds of reasons for them. I would encourage you to make some deliberate decisions about what kind of attachments you want and why you want them. How large are they going to be? And just do some planning. Just decide on a sensible maximum size limit and review it now and then. What seemed sensible for a mobile phone photo 5 years ago is not the same size as it is these days. So you do need to keep these things under review. Regularly review how you're using attachments, and don't try and use us as a file distribution platform. ServiceNow is not good for that. If you want to store multi-gigabyte files, there are probably better places to do it. And then we can work with them rather than trying to take that piece of functionality.
100%.
Yeah, I keep hearing in my head that famous quote from somebody from just a few years ago who said, "We'll never need more than 64K of RAM."
That was more than a few years ago, Sean.
Yeah, well, but to Gareth's point, the other piece that I wanted to comment with regard to large attachments is this sounds weird, but it's never too late to iterate. We can look at any area where we have files that are maybe large attachments and look to going, is there a way we could re-engineer or add a field that has a link to this system that does keep large files? Is there a way that we could go forward and make that adjustment so that I had a customer that was actually doing a lot of that. They were putting, and in particular, this came into the governance issue as well, because they were putting legal information in and therefore keeping all their legal briefs and docs in there. And that was like let's do a reference to that file, which then allows us to manage the security of it as well as not owning those huge files of data. So.
All right. Sys audit cleanup.
This is a tricky one. I've done lots of implementations for customers, and when you say to a lot of people in business, what do you need to audit? The immediate response is everything. And if you audit everything, that takes up a lot of space really quickly. My recommendation is think about what you actually need to audit and why. There are going to be compliance aspects of your system that absolutely you want to audit. There are security aspects that you want to audit. But you don't need to know the complete history of the title of a knowledge article going back to the dawn of time. It's really not that important. So again, I keep saying make considered decisions. I think it's really key. Work out what tables you want to audit, and then within those tables, are there specific fields where you need field level auditing, and make a deliberate choice rather than just trying to make a blanket decision that covers literally everything in the world ever.
Yeah, because what I've found with customers, they want to save everything, whether it's tickets or audit files or whatever. It gets to be a data management nightmare, and then they usually can't find what they're looking for anyway, or they never refer back to it. So making those very conscious decisions, I think, is really important.
And Can I do a quick shout out for the log export service that came out in to Utah, I believe, is generally available and lets you stream near real time out to your other corporate logging systems. Again, to get that stuff consolidated with your other enterprise systems, and then also we don't need to keep it in ServiceNow since the security team has access to those things. So there's a free starter tier for that as well.
All right, help us on the way. Can you put the name of that in the chat just so everybody can see that? That would be great.
Oh, Sean
I
beat
just
me
threw
to
the docs in.
Oh, Sean,
Because-
whew, look at you.
Well,
Yes.
as soon as I heard it, I went, ooh, wait, let me look at this.
See, we learn something new every day about ServiceNow. The platform has so many capabilities and features.
Yeah.
So next up, we got some conversation here around the syslog.
Yeah, it's a different conversation from the audit log because syslog is rotated by default. It's already going to disappear after a while, but that doesn't stop it becoming a problem. Particularly if you are developing your own customizations, your own scripts. I've been a developer. I've had to troubleshoot things by adding things to logs, and it's very easy to solve the problem and go, great, it's done, and move on and onto the next feature, leaving those logs in place. That's probably not a problem while you're in development. It's probably not a problem when you get in test. Once you get into production and things scale, it becomes thousands and tens of thousands of log entries, and it just makes finding other things in the logs really difficult. So, I mean, by all means, logging is important, but log exceptions, not successes. Make sure that troubleshooting and debug logs actually get turned off after you have solved the problem and got into UAT, and make that a part of your day-to-day development cycle. You do need them, but you don't need to overly log.
Right. And so in the appendix, we're providing a diagram that will help you figure out what tools you can use to accomplish some of these tasks. But this is sort of like an overview, like as we say, the 80-20 rule. It might look something like this. And I think, Sean, you were going to give us a little more color on this.
Yikes, I'm jumping to the slide. Hang on one sec. On the I'm looking and going, wait, where are my notes? Where are my notes? Where are my notes?
Yeah.
Well, I think mostly with regard to building out those or prioritizing those, if we're looking for managing the archiving pieces, the most important piece that we want to look to, because that's the bulk of what people are hitting, right? And it's those tasks that people are doing work with that we want to streamline the performance of the most. So that makes sense to be first targets for managing and trimming things out for. Similarly, as we start looking to the other big pieces in terms of which do I target iteratively, working out things like email, as Jared mentioned, we need to be careful about holding things too long because of those risks, as well as size. CMDB, when we look at the data manager, we're looking at that again for accuracy and use. So if we kind of look at all of these components in terms of which ones do I tackle when, and we were to prioritize or set some criteria, we're looking for who's using what most, and that's our first target for what to manage most with archiving and just data management. And then what is most important from governance is the next thing on our tackle or table that we're structuring. Things like table rotation, and as we were talking about, large data pieces can be iteratively improved. And so we should schedule in our time for cadence to say, maybe quarterly we're reviewing and going, what things can we improve on all of this stuff that we've tackled so far?
All right. Well, that pretty much wraps up our presentation for today. We are going to run that poll number 3 again. Apologize for making you answer this question twice. But now that you've attended the webinar, or you feel like you can explain to your management why you need to devote time and resources to this care and feeding of your instances? Are you motivated to create a maintenance cadence? Or are you on the right track and definitely going to level up? And this is a multiple choice, so you can select more than one of these if you'd like. And I see the responses are coming in here fast and furious. And also, if you have a question, please enter it into the Q&A. We'll start picking off those questions once we get through the poll here. We'll start answering those questions live. All right, it looks like we've got a pretty good response here on the poll. So let's go ahead and stop the poll, Sean, and we'll move on to the next thing. This is what we put in at the slide in every deck that we do with these webinars. It's the summary or the too long didn't read. So if you want to jump right to the slide, you can come here and get the overview of what we're doing. This is sort of for people who want to take a screenshot so they can remember what this was about. And if they want to come back to the slide, the information later, you can come back to it. But this is just kind of a quick summary for you. All right, well, I'm sorry, folks, we are at the top of the hour, so that concludes our webinar for today. I want to thank you all for joining. There will be a post-event survey coming out to you, so please put your comments and suggestions in there. We're always iterating to try to make our webinars better and be on topic, and hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, folks. Thanks for including me, guys.